The ceiling was already groaning ominously when Hero made his 20th and final trip into the burning Lincoln Elementary School. His golden coat was singed black, his paws were bleeding, and his breathing came in harsh, labored gasps. Any rational creature would have stopped long ago, but 6-year-old Lily Chen was still trapped in Mrs. Peterson's classroom, crying for her friend Emma, who had just been rescued, and Hero had never left a child behind. 19 children were safe because of his impossible courage. 19 families had been reunited because a German Shepherd police dog had chosen to disobey orders and follow his heart instead. But as Hero struggled up those compromised stairs one last time, his legs shaking with exhaustion, everyone watching knew they were witnessing something that transcended normal heroism. This wasn't just a dog doing his job. This was pure love in action. The kind of selfless devotion that transforms ordinary moments into miracles and ordinary animals into legends. Officer Anderson stood at the rescue window, tears streaming down his soot-stained face as he watched his partner disappear into the smoke-filled hallway. "Come on, Hero," he whispered. "Just one more. Bring her home, and then we'll take care of you forever." What happened in the next 5 minutes would break hearts around the world, but also prove that some bonds are stronger than fire. Some love is greater than fear, and some heroes have 4 legs and hearts, big enough to save everyone but themselves. The first rays of dawn painted the sky in soft pastels as Officer Michael Anderson pushed through the glass doors of the 12th Precinct. The familiar scent of coffee and leather greeted him, mixed with the subtle aroma of disinfectant that seemed to permeate every police station. But it wasn't these familiar smells that quickened his pace. It was the anticipation of seeing his 4-legged partner, who had become so much more than just a working companion. "Hero," Anderson called out, his voice carrying the warmth of genuine affection. From the K9 unit area came the thunderous sound of paws against linoleum, followed by an explosion of golden fur and unbridled joy. Hero bounded toward his partner with the enthusiasm of a puppy. Despite his 3 years of rigorous police training, his tail wagged so vigorously that his entire rear end swayed, and his dark chocolate eyes sparkled with pure happiness. "There's my boy," Anderson laughed, kneeling down as Hero launched himself into his arms, nearly knocking the veteran officer off balance. The German Shepherd's tongue found Anderson's cheek in a series of wet, affectionate kisses that spoke volumes about their bond. Others might not. This morning greeting wasn't just routine. It was a sacred ritual that strengthened the invisible thread connecting him and Hero. In their line of work, trust wasn't just important. It was literally a matter of life and death. "Come on, Hero. Let's get you ready for the day," Anderson said, leading his partner to their designated area. Hero trotted alongside, his professional demeanor returning as they approached his equipment station. Anderson retrieved the special brush from Hero's grooming kit, a soft, bristled brush that Hero had grown to love over the years. As Anderson began the methodical process of brushing Hero's magnificent golden coat, the dog's eyes half closed in contentment. "You know what today is, don't you, boy?" Anderson murmured, working through a small tangle behind Hero's left ear. "We've got our usual patrol, and I promise we'll stop by Lincoln Elementary. I know how much you love seeing those kids." Hero's ears perked forward at the mention of the school, and his tail began its happy rhythm once again. If Anderson didn't know better, he'd swear Hero understood every word. But then again, after 3 years together, maybe he did. Anderson continued brushing, taking special care around Hero's shoulders where the harness would rest. "Mrs. Peterson's class has been asking about you again. Apparently, little Emma has been telling everyone stories about our visits. That girl's got quite the imagination." As he worked, Anderson checked Hero's paws for any cuts or abrasions, examined his ears for signs of infection, and ran his hands along the dog's ribs to ensure he was maintaining proper weight. These weren't just routine checks. They were moments of connection, times when Anderson could assess not just Hero's physical condition, but his emotional state as well. Hero stood perfectly still during the examination, a testament to their trust and his professional training. But when Anderson reached for his service harness, Hero's entire demeanor shifted. His posture straightened, his expression became focused and alert. The transformation from beloved pet to professional police dog was instantaneous and remarkable. "That's my partner," Anderson said with pride, securing the harness across Hero's chest and back. The black leather bore Hero's badge number, K9 Unit 847, along with patches identifying him as a certified police service dog. Hero looked up at Anderson with an expression that seemed to say, "I'm ready for whatever the day brings." And Anderson knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that Hero meant it. The patrol car rolled slowly through the tree-lined streets of Maplewood, its windows down to let in the crisp morning air. Hero had claimed his favorite spot, head thrust out the passenger window, ears flapping in the breeze, nose working overtime to catalog the thousands of scents. Training and professional capabilities, there was something eternally youthful about the way he enjoyed these simple pleasures. His tongue lolled out slightly, and his eyes were bright with curiosity as they passed familiar landmarks. "Look at that, Hero," Anderson said, pointing toward Riverside Park, where early morning joggers were beginning their daily routines. "Mrs. Chen is out with her new puppy again. Remember when we helped find him last month?" Hero's ears twitched with recognition, and he turned briefly toward Anderson before returning his attention to the street. Their patrol route was more than just a job to both of them. It was their neighborhood, their community, filled with people they'd grown to know and care about. They passed the corner grocery store where Mr. Rodriguez was already setting up his outdoor fruit display. He waved enthusiastically when he spotted their patrol car, and Hero's tail thumped against the seat in response to the familiar greeting. "Buenos dias, Officer Anderson. Buenos dias, Hero," Mr. Rodriguez called out. Anderson slowed the car and rolled down his window completely. "Morning, Mr. Rodriguez. Everything quiet overnight?" "Sir, very quiet." "Hero, I saved you something special," the elderly man said, producing a small dog biscuit from his apron pocket. Hero's professional demeanor softened as Anderson gave the okay, and he gently took the treat from Mr. Rodriguez's weathered hand. The simple interaction spoke volumes about Hero's reputation in the community. He wasn't just a police dog to these people. He was their friend, their protector, their neighbor. As they continued their patrol, Anderson felt the familiar swell of pride, watching how Hero interacted with their community. At every stop sign, Hero would scan the area with professional thoroughness. But the moment he spotted children, his tail would begin its happy rhythm. "There it is, boy," Anderson said, as Lincoln Elementary School came into view. The red brick building sat nestled among old oak trees, its playground already showing signs of early morning activity as teachers prepared for the day ahead. Hero's excitement was palpable. His whining grew more urgent, and he shifted restlessly in his seat, knowing exactly where they were and what this meant. This wasn't just another stop on their patrol route. This was the highlight of Hero's day. Anderson parked in the visitor's spot and had barely opened the car door before Hero was out and stretching, his entire body vibrating with anticipation. But despite his excitement, Hero waited for Anderson's command before moving toward the school. "Okay, Hero, let's go say hello." The moment they stepped onto the playground, they were spotted. Professional alertness remained, but it was tempered with gentle patience as children surrounded him. He lowered himself to the ground, making it easier for smaller children to pet him, and his tail created little dust clouds as it swept back and forth across the asphalt. 7-year-old Emma Martinez, the unofficial leader of Mrs. Peterson's second-grade class, pushed through the crowd of children. "Hero, I knew you'd come today. I told everyone you would." Hero's response to Emma was special. Anderson had noticed it during previous visits. The dog seemed to recognize her natural leadership qualities and responded to her with particular attention. When Emma spoke, Hero's ears would perk forward, and he would focus on her with the same intensity he showed during police training. "Officer Anderson," came the warm voice of Principal Martinez, no relation to young Emma despite sharing a surname. The principal approached with a coffee cup in hand and a genuinely pleased expression. "Right on time, as always. The children have been asking about Hero all week." Anderson shook the principal's hand while keeping one eye on Hero, who was now lying on his side as children took turns gently petting his golden fur. "He looks forward to these visits just as much as they do. I swear he knows our schedule better than I do." "Actually, I'm glad you stopped by today," Principal Martinez continued. "We're planning our annual Fire Safety Week next month, and I was hoping Hero might be able to participate. The children would love to learn about how police dogs help keep the community safe." "I'm sure Hero would love that," Anderson replied, watching as his partner gently licked the hand of a shy kindergartner who had finally worked up the courage to approach. "He's got a real gift with kids." As they prepared to leave, Hero dutifully returned to Anderson's side, but not without a backward glance at the children who were already begging for his return. The bond he'd formed with Lincoln Elementary was something special, a connection that went beyond his professional duties to touch something deeper in his generous heart. The radio had been quiet for most of their patrol, filled only with routine check-ins and minor traffic violations. Anderson was beginning to think it might be one of those rare, peaceful days when the crackle of static suddenly cut through the morning calm. Hero's ears immediately swiveled toward the radio, his body tensing with the alertness that came from months of conditioning. Even before the dispatcher's voice filled the car, Hero sensed the change in atmosphere. All units, we have a structure fire at Lincoln Elementary School, 1247 Oak Street. Multiple children and staff potentially trapped. All available units respond immediately. Fire department en route." The words hit Anderson like a physical blow. For a moment, time seemed suspended as the full impact registered. Lincoln Elementary, the school that who had been petting Hero and laughing just hours ago. "Unit 847 responding," Anderson said into his radio, his voice steady despite the ice-cold fear gripping his chest. "ETA 2 minutes. Hero was already on high alert, his body rigid with tension as he sensed Anderson's emotional shift. The dog's dark eyes were fixed on his partner, reading the subtle changes in body language and vocal tone that meant danger. Real danger. Anderson hit the sirens and lights, and the patrol cars surged forward through the streets they'd been peacefully patrolling just moments before. The familiar neighborhood now blurred past in a kaleidoscope of color and motion. but all Anderson could think about were the faces of the children they'd seen that morning. Emma Martinez, with her bright smile and natural leadership, the shy kindergartner who had finally worked up the courage to pet Hero. Mrs. Peterson's entire second-grade class that Hero had grown to love during the regular visits. Hero's behavior in the car was unlike anything Anderson had ever seen. The dog wasn't just alert. He was agitated, whining low in his throat and shifting restlessly in his seat. It was as if Hero somehow understood that the place they were racing toward, the place he considered special, was in danger. "I know, boy," Anderson said, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "I know." As they rounded the final corner onto Oak Street, the smell hit them first. Acrid smoke that burned their nostrils and made Hero's sensitive nose twitch. Then they saw it. Lincoln Elementary School, the red brick building that had been so peaceful just hours before, now wreathed in gray-black smoke that poured from several windows. Anderson's heart clenched as he took in the scene. Teachers were herding groups of children to safety areas across the street, their faces masks of controlled panic as they tried to maintain order, while internally terrified for their students. Parents were beginning to arrive, having heard the news, their faces etched with the kind of fear that only comes when your child's safety is uncertain. Hero was out of the car almost before Anderson had fully stopped, his training taking over. But this wasn't like their other emergency calls. This was personal. This was their school, their children, their community. Anderson grabbed Hero's lead and they ran toward the chaotic scene, where Fire Chief Williams was already coordinating the response with his arriving crews. The chief's face was grim as he surveyed the building. "Anderson, thank God you're here," Chief Williams called out. "We've got a problem. Mrs. Peterson's second-grade class, 20 kids. They're trapped on the second floor." The stairwell. Hero's whining grew more urgent, and Anderson looked down to see his partner staring up at the second-floor windows, where smoke was beginning to seep through the glass. The dog's entire body was taut with tension, every muscle coiled as if ready to spring into action. "What about ladder access?" Anderson asked, though he could already see fire trucks positioning their equipment. "Building's too close to the trees on that side, and the fire's spreading too fast. We're looking at maybe 10-15 minutes before the structure becomes completely unsafe." Chief Williams' voice carried the weight of impossible decisions. "We need a miracle, Anderson." Anderson looked down at Hero, whose dark eyes were fixed on the second-floor windows. In that moment, Anderson saw something in his partner's expression that he'd never seen before, a determination that went beyond training, beyond duty. Hero wasn't just looking at a burning building. He was looking at children in danger, his children. The peaceful morning that had begun with routine patrols and gentle interactions with smiling children had transformed into a nightmare scenario. But as Anderson knelt beside Hero and saw the unwavering resolve in those intelligent brown eyes, he realized that sometimes miracles came in the form of a brave dog's heart and an unbreakable bond between partners. The real story was just beginning. The chaos that greeted Anderson and Hero at Lincoln Elementary was unlike anything either had witnessed in their 3 years together. Teachers ran across the playground carrying crying children, their faces streaked with soot and terror. The acrid smell of burning wood and melting plastic filled the air, creating a toxic cloud that made everyone's eyes water and throats burn. Hero's sensitive nose immediately went to work, twitching frantically as he processed the overwhelming cocktail of scents. Beneath the obvious smells of smoke and fire, his trained senses detected something that made his entire body go rigid with alarm. The distinct scent of fear, specifically the fear of children coming from inside the burning building. "Chief Williams," Anderson called out, running toward the incident commander, who was coordinating the response from a makeshift command post near the fire trucks. Hero stayed close to Anderson's side, but his head kept turning toward the building, his ears straining to catch sounds that human ears couldn't detect. "Anderson, thank God you're here," Chief Williams said, his face grim behind a mask of sweat and soot. "We've got a nightmare scenario. The building's old, built in the 1960s, and the fire started in the electrical room on the first floor. It spread faster than we anticipated." Around them, paramedics were checking children and teachers for smoke inhalation, while other firefighters were setting up equipment with practiced efficiency. But Anderson could see the tension in their movements, the urgency that spoke of a race against time. "What's the situation with evacuations?" Anderson asked, watching his hero's attention remain fixed on the second floor of the building. Chief Williams consulted his clipboard, his expression darkening. "We've accounted for most of the school. What we're missing, Mrs. Peterson's entire second-grade class, 20 children, plus Mrs. Peterson herself. Last anyone saw, they were in their classroom on the second floor, doing morning reading time." Anderson's heart sank. Mrs. Peterson's class, the very children who had surrounded Hero with such joy just hours earlier. Emma Martinez, who always greeted Hero with such enthusiasm, the shy kindergartner who had finally worked up courage to pet him, all of them trapped in that inferno. "The main staircase?" Anderson asked, though he could already see flames licking at the second-floor windows. "Completely engulfed," Fire Captain Rodriguez said, joining their conversation. His face was streaked with sweat and ash. "The fire started right at the base of the stairwell and shot up like a chimney. There's no way we can get crews up those stairs. The structure's too compromised." Hero's whining grew more insistent, and Anderson looked down to see his partner's entire body trembling with an energy he'd never witnessed before. The dog's dark eyes were fixed on the second-floor windows, and his nose continued to work frantically, processing scents that told a story humans couldn't read. "What about ladder access?" Anderson pressed, desperation creeping into his voice. Captain Rodriguez shook his head grimly. "The building's positioned too close to those old oak trees on the east side. We can't get our ladder truck in position without risking getting tangled in the branches, and on the west side the fire's already broken through multiple windows. Too dangerous to attempt a rescue that way." As if to emphasize his point, a window on the second floor suddenly exploded outward, sending a shower of glass and debris to the ground below. The crowd of parents and teachers gasped collectively, and several mothers began to cry. Hero's reaction was immediate and startling. He began to pace in tight circles, his whining becoming more urgent. Anderson had seen Hero alert many times before, but this was different. This wasn't just professional alertness, this was personal anguish. Hero knew those children. He loved those children. "How long do we have?" Anderson asked, though he dreaded the answer. Chief Williams checked his watch, his expression grave. "Maybe 15 minutes before the second floor becomes structurally unsafe, maybe less. The fire's burning hot and fast, and this old building—" He trailed off, but the implication was clear. Anderson knelt beside Hero, placing a steadying hand on his partner's trembling flank. "I know, boy. I know they're up there." Hero looked up at Anderson with an expression that was heartbreakingly human in its desperation. Those intelligent brown eyes seemed to be pleading, "We have to do something. We have to save them." Standing up, Anderson surveyed the scene with new determination. The traditional rescue methods weren't working. The stairs were impassable, ladder access was blocked, and time was running out. But as he looked down at Hero, whose entire body was vibrating with the need to act, Anderson began to realize that maybe the solution wasn't traditional at all. Hero's nose was still working, still detecting scents, still reading the story written in the smoke-filled air. And what that story told him was clear. Children were trapped, children were scared, and children needed help. The same children who had petted him and laughed with him and made him feel like more than just a working dog. "We need options, Chief," Anderson said. his voice carrying a new edge of determination. Because those kids up there, they're not just statistics, they're our kids. Hero's pacing intensified, and his whining took on a new quality, not just distress, but purpose. As Anderson watched his partner's behavior, a crazy, impossible idea began to form in his mind. An idea that went against everything he'd been taught about emergency response protocols. An idea that could save 20 children's lives. Without waiting for further orders, Anderson made the decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. "Hero, stay," he commanded, his voice firm despite the chaos around them. "Stay here with Chief Williams." Hero's reaction was immediate and distressing. The dog's whining became more frantic, and he tried to follow Anderson toward the building, only to be brought up short by the command that had been drilled into him through thousands of hours of training. Stay meant stay, no matter what. Even when every instinct in Hero's body screamed at him to follow his partner into danger. Anderson's heart broke as he saw the confusion and distress in Hero's eyes, but he forced himself to focus on the mission ahead. Someone needed to make sure the first floor was completely clear before they could focus all efforts on the second floor. And if there were children hiding somewhere, scared and unable to respond to calls, Anderson needed to find them. The heat hit him like a physical wall the moment he stepped through the main entrance. The familiar hallways of Lincoln Elementary, usually filled with children's laughter and the gentle hum of learning, were now choked with thick, acrid smoke. Anderson pulled his shirt up over his nose and mouth, squinting through the haze as he began his systematic search. Outside, Hero was living through his own kind of torture. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to follow Anderson, to be by his partner's side as they'd been trained to do. But the command to stay was absolute, and Hero's excellent training warred with his desperate need to. Chief Williams said, trying to comfort the distressed dog. "Anderson knows what he's doing." But Hero's agitation only increased. His sensitive nose told him stories that the humans couldn't read. Anderson was safe for now, moving through the first floor, methodically. But above on the second floor, the scent signature of 20 terrified children grew stronger and more desperate with each passing moment. Inside the building, Anderson's search was yielding results, though not the ones he'd hoped for. The first-grade classrooms were empty, their evacuations successful. The main office was clear, but as he approached the supply closet near the kindergarten rooms, he heard something that made his heart race, the soft sound of muffled crying. "Hello?" Anderson called out, his voice gentle, despite the urgency of the situation. "Is someone in there?" The crying stopped abruptly, replaced by terrified silence. Anderson tried the door handle and found it unlocked. As he slowly opened the door, he was met with 3 pairs of wide, frightened eyes, belonging to kindergartners who couldn't have been older than 5 or 6. "It's okay," Anderson said softly, kneeling down to their level despite the smoke swirling around them. "I'm Officer Anderson. I'm here to get you out safely." The children, 2 little girls and a boy, were huddled together like frightened puppies. They were covered in soot, and tears had carved clean tracks down their dirty faces. The sight of them, so small and vulnerable, filled Anderson with a fierce, protective instinct. "Where's Hero?" asked one of the little girls, her voice barely a whisper. "Hero's waiting for you outside," Anderson assured her, carefully lifting her into his arms. "But right now, we need to get you to safety." The journey to the exit with the first child felt like the longest walk of Anderson's life. The smoke was getting thicker, and he could feel the building's temperature rising with each step. Outside, the moment the waiting crowd saw him emerge with a child, a cheer went up from the assembled parents and teachers. Hero's reaction was explosive. The sight of Anderson carrying a rescued child, triggered something primal in the dog's protective instincts. His pacing became more frantic, his whining more urgent. These were his children too, and every second they remained in danger was torture for the loyal dog. Anderson made 2 more trips into the building, each one more dangerous than the last. By the time he emerged with the 3rd kindergartner, the smoke was so thick that he was coughing violently, and his eyes were streaming with tears. But 3 children were safe. 3 families were reunited, and 3 small lives had been preserved. Hero greeted Anderson's return each time with a mixture of relief and increased agitation. The dog could sense that his partner was pushing himself to the limit, could smell the smoke that clung to Anderson's clothes and hair, but more than that, could detect something that was driving him to the edge of his self-control. The faint but unmistakable sound of children crying from the 2nd floor. "That's all of them on the 1st floor," Anderson reported to Chief Williams, accepting a bottle of water and gratefully rinsing the smoke taste from his mouth. "But Chief, we're running out of time. I could hear the building settling, and the temperatures rising fast." As if to punctuate his words, a loud crack echoed from inside the building, followed by the sound of something heavy falling. The structural integrity was failing, and everyone knew it. Hero's whining reached a new pitch of desperation. His training told him to stay, but everything else about him, his heart, his instincts, his love for those children, told him to act. The sound that changed everything was barely audible to human ears, a faint cry, drifting down from the 2nd floor, carried on the smoke-laden air. But to Hero's extraordinarily sensitive hearing, it was as clear as a bell. Emma's voice, calling for help, calling for him. "Hero! Hero! Where are you? We need Hero!" The child's desperate plea shattered something inside Hero's well-trained mind. For 3 years he had been the perfect police dog, obedient, disciplined, always following orders. But in that moment, faced with the cries of children he loved, Hero made a choice that went beyond training, beyond orders, beyond everything except the call of his heart. Anderson was 20 feet away, discussing strategy with the fire chief, when Hero made his decision. The dog looked once more toward his partner, his dark eyes filled with what could only be described as apology and determination. Then, for the first time in his career, Hero deliberately disobeyed a direct command. He ran toward the burning building. "Hero, no!" Anderson's shout cut through the chaos as he spotted his partner's golden form disappearing through the smoke-filled entrance. "Hero, stay!" But Hero was already inside, his powerful legs carrying him through the familiar hallways that were now transformed into a hellscape of smoke and flame. The heat was incredible, far worse than anything he'd experienced during his fire training exercises. His paws immediately felt the burning sensation of superheated floors. But Hero pressed on, driven by a purpose that transcended physical discomfort. The staircase that had once been a normal part of the school's architecture was now a twisted monument to destruction. The wooden steps were charred and weakened, some already collapsed completely. Flames licked up the walls, and the metal handrail was too hot to touch. For a human, it would have been impossible to navigate. But Hero wasn't human. He was smaller, more agile, and driven by a desperation that gave him superhuman, or perhaps, but didn't stop. The second step was worse, the wood soft and giving beneath his weight. But he could hear them now, 20 young voices crying and calling for help from Mrs. Peterson's classroom. Each step up the burning staircase was an act of pure will. Hero's beautiful golden coat began to singe, filling his sensitive nose with the acrid smell of his own burning fur. His paw pads, tough as they were taking damage with each step. But above him, those voices continued to call, and among them he could distinguish the voices of children he knew personally. "Emma," he seemed to whisper through his labored breathing. "Marcus, Sarah, I'm coming." The journey up those stairs felt like an eternity, though it probably took less than 2 minutes. When Hero finally reached the second floor, he was met with a sight that would have broken a human heart. The long hallway filled with smoke so thick it was like walking through gray cotton. The heat was unbearable, and the sound of the fire consuming the building created an almost deafening roar. But Hero pressed on, using his nose to guide him through the smoke-filled corridor. Mrs. Peterson's classroom was at the far end of the hall, and with each step the children's voices grew clearer, more desperate. When Hero finally reached the classroom door, he found it closed but not locked. Using his body weight, he managed to push it open, and the sight that greeted him was both heartbreaking and inspiring. 20 second graders were huddled in the far corner of the room, as far from the door as possible. Mrs. Peterson had positioned herself between the children and the danger, her arms spread wide as if she could shield them all with her body. The windows were too high and too dangerous for the children to attempt escape, and the smoke was beginning to seep under the door and through the vents. But when Hero appeared in the doorway, his golden form emerging from the smoke like something from a dream, the children's terrified cries transformed into something else entirely. "Hero!" Emma Martinez screamed, her voice cracking with emotion and relief. "Hero's here. Hero came to save us." The effect on the other children was immediate and profound. Their tears of fear became tears of hope, and their desperate huddle began to loosen as they turned toward their four-legged savior. Hero stood in that doorway, his coat singed, his paws bleeding, his lungs burning from the toxic smoke. But his tail was wagging, and his eyes were bright with determination. He had found them, against all odds, through flames and smoke and his own considerable pain. He had found his children. Mrs. Peterson looked at Hero with an expression of pure amazement and gratitude. "Hero," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Name with increasing desperation. They needed to move, and they needed to move now. Hero approached the group of children slowly, his professional training taking over despite the chaos around them. His presence seemed to calm them, and even in their fear, they responded to his quiet authority with the trust they'd developed during his many visits to their school. In that moment, surrounded by smoke and flame and 20 terrified children, Hero transformed from a disobedient dog into something far greater, a beacon of hope in the darkness, a bridge between certain death and possible salvation. The real rescue was about to begin. The moment Hero stepped into Mrs. Peterson's classroom, 20 pairs of frightened eyes turned toward him like sunflowers seeking light. The children were pressed against the far wall, their small bodies trembling with fear and the effects of smoke inhalation. Mrs. Peterson had done her best to keep them calm, but the terror in their young faces was unmistakable until they saw their four-legged friend emerge from the nightmare outside their door. Hero understood instinctively that his approach needed to be different from his usual police work. These weren't suspects to apprehend or evidence to locate. These were children, scared and vulnerable, who needed comfort as much as they needed rescue. Despite the agony in his burned paws and the smoke searing his lungs, Hero lowered himself to the floor and began to crawl toward the group, making himself as small and non-threatening as possible. Hero. Emma Martinez's voice was barely a whisper, as if she couldn't quite believe what she was seeing. The 7-year-old girl, who had always been the natural leader of her class, pushed forward from the group, her eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and dawning hope. Hero's tail began its familiar wag, though more subdued than usual due to his physical distress. He continued his slow approach, allowing Emma to process his presence and spread the word to her classmates. "It's Hero!" Emma suddenly shouted, her voice cracking with emotion, but carrying across the smoke-filled room. "It's really Hero! He's here to save us!" The transformation in the children was immediate and profound. Where moments before there had been only despair and terror, now there was something else: hope. The children began to sit up straighter, their crying subsided to sniffles, and several of them actually smiled through their tears. Hero reached Emma first, gently nuzzling her soot-stained cheek with his nose. Despite the pain and chaos around him, he forced his body language to remain calm and reassuring. His police training had taught him to read situations quickly and respond appropriately, and right now his assessment was clear. These children needed to believe that rescue was possible. "Good boy, Hero," Emma whispered, wrapping her small arms around his neck. "I knew you would come. I told..." Amazement as Hero systematically approached each child, offering a gentle touch or reassuring nuzzle before moving to the next. Even in these dire circumstances, the dog seemed to understand exactly what each child needed: a moment of connection, a reminder that they weren't alone. But Hero's tactical mind was also working. The smoke was getting thicker by the minute, and he could hear the ominous creaking of the building's structure. They needed to start moving, but he also needed to choose the right child to go first, someone who could set an example for the others. His choice surprised Mrs. Peterson. Instead of selecting confident Emma or one of the older children, Hero approached Marcus Thompson, a small, quiet boy who was often overlooked in the classroom. Marcus was pressed against the wall, his knees drawn up to his chest, shaking with terror. Hero gently nosed Marcus's hands away from his face and looked directly into the boy's frightened eyes. There was something in Hero's steady gaze that seemed to communicate directly to Marcus's heart. "I see you. I choose you. You can do this." "Marcus," Hero seemed to say through his patient presence, "will you trust me?" The boy's response was miraculous. Despite his natural timidity, despite his terror, Marcus slowly uncurled himself and reached out to touch Hero's singed fur. Are you going to take me to my mommy?" he whispered. Hero's tail wagged once, definitively, and he began to move toward the door. Marcus, as if hypnotized by Hero's confidence, stood up on shaking legs and followed. The journey through the smoke-filled hallway was the longest walk of Marcus's young life, but Hero never left his side. When the smoke became too thick and Marcus began to cough and stumble, Hero pressed his body against the boy's legs, offering support and guidance. When the heat became overwhelming and Marcus wanted to stop, Hero's steady forward momentum encouraged him to keep moving. At the far end of the hallway, where a window had been broken out by firefighters, strong hands reached through to pull Marcus to safety. The crowd outside erupted in cheers as the first child emerged, and Marcus was immediately surrounded by paramedics and wrapped in his mother's tearful embrace. Hero stood at that window for just a moment, his sides heaving as he tried to catch his breath. Through the opening, he could see Anderson's face in the crowd below, filled with a mixture of terror and pride that spoke volumes about their partnership. But there was no time to rest. Disappear with Hero into the smoke-filled hallway, And when Hero returned alone, they understood what it meant. Their friend was safe, and rescue was possible. "Who's next?" Emma asked, stepping forward with the natural leadership that had always made her special. But Hero had already made his choice. His methodical approach was becoming clear to Mrs. Peterson, who watched in amazement as Hero selected Sarah Kim, another quiet child who often struggled with confidence. There was something almost mystical about Hero's ability to identify which children needed to go first. Not necessarily the bravest or the strongest, but those who most needed to believe in their own courage. The pattern Hero established was both simple and brilliant. Return to the classroom, offer comfort and reassurance to all the children. Select the next rescue. Guide them through the dangerous hallway, deliver them to safety, and repeat. But with each trip, the danger increased exponentially. By his third rescue, shy Timothy Rodriguez, who clutched Hero's fur so tightly, the dog had to pause several times to let the boy readjust his grip. The hallway floor was becoming dangerously hot. Hero's paw pads, already burned from his initial journey up the stairs, were taking more damage with each step. His beautiful golden coat was now singed black in several places, and his breathing was becoming increasingly labored. But the children's trust in Hero grew with each successful rescue. They began to stand up straighter when he entered the room, and their tears of fear transformed into tears of gratitude and hope. When Hero approached for his fourth rescue, selecting Jamie Chen, a boy who had been crying inconsolably for his grandmother, Jamie actually managed a small smile. "Is it my turn, Hero?" Jamie asked, wiping his nose on his sleeve. "Will you take me to Grammy?" Hero's tail wagged despite his exhaustion, and Jamie walked to the door with considerably more confidence than the children who had gone before him. Mrs. Peterson found herself overwhelmed with emotion as she watched her students being saved one by one. "Hero," she whispered during one of his brief returns, "you magnificent, brave dog. How can I ever thank you?" Hero's response was to approach her and gently nuzzle her hand before turning to select his fifth rescue. There was no time for gratitude. Only action, only the next child, only the next trip through the increasingly dangerous hallway. Outside the building, the firefighters and rescue personnel were witnessing something none of them had ever seen before. Captain Rodriguez, a 20-year veteran of emergency response, stood at the base of the ladder that had been positioned at the rescue window, catching children as Hero delivered them one by one. Courage. Look at their faces when they come out. It was true. Each child that Hero delivered showed remarkable composure for someone who had just escaped a burning building. They were scared, certainly, and many were crying, but there was something else in their expressions, a quiet confidence that came from having been chosen and protected by their four-legged hero. Hero's physical condition was deteriorating rapidly. His coat was now more black than gold, his breathing came in harsh pants, and there was a slight tremor in his legs that spoke of exhaustion and pain. But his spirit remained unbroken, his determination unwavering. After his sixth rescue, bringing out Elena Santos, who had whispered "thank you" in both English and Spanish as they walked through the smoke, Hero paused at the rescue window longer than usual. Anderson's voice carried up from below, filled with desperate concern.
"Hero! Hero! That's enough, boy. Come down now."
But Hero's ears were tuned to different voices, the voices of the 14 children still trapped in Mrs. Peterson's classroom. He could hear their increased coughing as the smoke grew thicker, could sense their growing fear as the building's structural sounds became more ominous. Anderson's command to retreat warred with Hero's deeper calling to protect. And for the second time that day, Hero chose to disobey his partner's direct order. He turned away from the window and began his 7th journey back to the classroom. When Hero completed his 10th rescue, guiding brave little David Park through the increasingly treacherous hallway, he had officially saved half of Mrs. Peterson's class. 10 children were safe in the arms of their families. 10 children had looked death in the face and lived to tell about it because of one dog's extraordinary courage. But Hero was paying a terrible price for his heroism. As he delivered David to the firefighters at the window, Hero's legs finally gave out. He collapsed onto the floor of the hallway, his sides heaving as he struggled to catch his breath through lungs that felt like they were on fire. His paw pads were raw and bleeding, his coat was singed beyond recognition, and his dark eyes showed the first signs of the exhaustion that threatened to overcome him. It was at this moment that Anderson made a decision that violated every emergency protocol he'd ever learned. Ignoring the shouts of the firefighters below, he climbed the rescue ladder and pulled himself through the 2nd-floor window.
Hero!
Anderson whispered, crawling across the superheated floor to reach his partner.
Oh God, Hero, what have you done?
Hero's tail managed a weak wag at the sight of his human partner. Despite his exhaustion and pain, there was something almost like relief in his expression, as if he'd been waiting for Anderson to understand what he was trying to accomplish. Anderson's hands shook as he examined Hero's injuries. The dog's beautiful coat was burned, his paws were bloody, and his breathing was dangerously labored. Any rational assessment would conclude that Hero had already pushed himself far beyond safe limits. "We need to get you out of here," Anderson said, his voice thick with emotion. "You've done enough. More than enough. Those 10 kids, they're alive because of you." But Hero's response shattered Anderson's heart. With tremendous effort, the exhausted dog struggled to his feet and looked toward the classroom where 10 more children waited. His message was clear. The job wasn't finished. "Hero, no," Anderson pleaded. "Look at you. You can barely stand. If you go back in there again." Hero's dark eyes met Anderson's, and in that moment, Anderson saw something that changed his understanding of courage forever. This wasn't just about training or duty or even instinct. This was about love. Pure, unconditional love. For children who needed protection. From the classroom came the sound of increased coughing and Mrs. Peterson's voice trying to keep the remaining children calm. The smoke was getting thicker. The building's structural integrity was failing, and time was running out. Hero took a step toward the classroom, his movement painful but determined. Then another step. His legs trembled with exhaustion, but his spirit remained unbroken. Anderson found himself faced with the most difficult decision of his career. Every protocol, every bit of training, every rational thought told him to physically restrain Hero and evacuate immediately. But looking into his partner's eyes, seeing the absolute determination there, Anderson realized that some things transcended protocol. 10 more, Anderson whispered, understanding finally dawning on him. "You're going to save all of them, aren't you?" Hero's tail gave one firm wag, and he began his 11th journey toward Mrs. Peterson's classroom. Anderson remained at the window, tears streaming down his soot-stained face as he watched his partner disappear once again into the smoke-filled hallway. Below, the crowd had grown silent, all eyes fixed on the 2nd-floor window where a miracle was unfolding, one child at a time. Captain Rodriguez's voice carried up from below. "Anderson, how many more?" 10, Anderson called back, his voice hoarse with emotion. 10 more children, and Hero's going to save every single one of them. In the distance, The sound of additional fire trucks arriving could be heard, but everyone understood that conventional rescue methods had been exhausted. There was only Hero now, one extraordinary dog with an unbreakable will and a heart big enough to encompass 20 scared children. The most dangerous part of the rescue was still ahead, but Hero, creature with an insatiable appetite. What had begun as an electrical fire in the basement had transformed into a raging inferno that threatened to bring down the entire 70-year-old structure. The temperature on the second floor had risen to nearly unbearable levels, and the smoke had become so thick that visibility was reduced to mere inches. Yet Hero pressed on. His 11th rescue was 9-year-old Michael Torres, a boy who had broken his arm the previous month and still wore a cast. The cast made navigating through the smoke-filled hallway even more treacherous, as Michael couldn't use both hands to steady himself. Hero compensated by walking closer to the boy, allowing Michael to rest his good hand on Hero's back for guidance and support. The heat was now so intense that Hero's already burned paw pads were taking additional damage with each step. His beautiful golden coat, once the pride of the canine unit, was now completely blackened and singed. In several places, the fur had burned away entirely, leaving raw patches of skin exposed to the superheated air. But Hero's dark eyes remained focused, his breathing labored but determined. By his 12th rescue, gentle Amy Richardson, who clutched a small stuffed rabbit that she refused to leave behind. The hallway floor had become dangerously unstable. Hero could feel the floorboards giving way slightly under their combined weight, and twice he had to guide Amy around sections where the floor had begun to sag ominously. "Hero hurts," Amy whispered as they walked, her young eyes taking in the dog's obvious injuries. "Hero needs doctor." But Hero's response was to quicken his pace slightly, understanding that time was becoming their greatest enemy. Back in Mrs. Peterson's classroom, the remaining children had organized themselves into what could only be described as a prayer circle. Emma Martinez, displaying leadership far beyond her 7 years, had convinced her classmates to take turns saying prayers for Hero's safety and success. "Please, God," whispered Carlos Mendez, as Hero disappeared with his 13th rescue, quiet Jennifer Walsh. "Keep Hero safe. Help him save us all. He's so brave," added Lily Chen, Emma's best friend, her voice thick with emotion. "Hero's the bravest dog in the whole world." Mrs. Peterson found herself amazed by her students' resilience and their absolute faith in their four-legged savior. Despite their fear, despite the smoke and heat and chaos around them, they maintained an almost religious belief that Hero would succeed. Outside the building, Anderson had established himself as the liaison between Hero's rescue efforts and the fire department's evacuation timeline. The conversation he was having with Chief Williams was one that no emergency responder ever wanted to have. "Anderson, I need to be honest with you," Chief Williams said, his face grave as he becomes completely unsafe. "The support beams on the first floor are compromised, and if they go," Anderson's stomach clenched. 10 minutes. Hero was on his 13th rescue, which meant 7 more children needed to be saved. 7 more trips through that hellish hallway, each one more dangerous than the last. "He won't leave them," Anderson said simply, watching the second-floor window where Hero would soon appear with Jennifer. "I know my partner. He won't leave a single child behind." By the time Hero completed his 15th rescue, bringing out Robert Kim, Sarah's younger brother, who had been crying for his sister the entire time, the community gathering outside Lincoln Elementary had grown to nearly 300 people. Parents, teachers, students from other schools, neighbors, and strangers, drawn by word of mouth, had all come to witness what many were beginning to recognize as something extraordinary. 5 more, Anderson called down to the crowd after Robert was safely in his parents' arms. 5 more children and they'll all be safe." A cheer went up from the assembled crowd, but it was tinged with anxiety. Everyone could see the increasing damage to the building, could smell the intensity of the fire, could feel the race against time that was playing out in real time. Hero's condition was now critical. His breathing came in harsh, rasping pants, and there was a tremor in his legs that spoke of a body pushed beyond its limits. His paw pads left bloody prints on the floor as he walked, and his singed coat offered little protection against the superheated air. But his spirit, that indefinable essence that made Hero who he was, remained unbroken. Each time he entered Mrs. Peterson's classroom, his tail would manage a weak but determined wag, and his eyes would scan the remaining children with the same careful assessment he'd shown from the beginning. "Only 5 more, Hero," Mrs. Peterson whispered as he selected his 16th rescue. "You're almost there. You're going to save us all." Hero's response was to approach little Sarah Martinez, no relation to Emma despite the shared surname, a shy girl who had been quietly crying since the ordeal began. When Hero gently nuzzled her hand, Sarah looked up with eyes full of trust and whispered, "I'm ready, Hero. Take me to my mama." The building groaned ominously around them, but Hero's focus never wavered. 5 children remained, and he would bring them home. The arrival of the first news van marked the moment when Hero's rescue mission transformed from a local emergency into something much larger. Channel 7's mobile unit pulled up just as Hero was completing his 13th rescue, and reporter Maria Santos immediately recognized that she was witnessing a story that would captivate the entire nation. "This is Maria Santos, reporting live from Lincoln Elementary School," she began, her camera operator focusing on the second-floor window where Hero would soon appear, where a police dog named Hero is single-handedly rescuing 20 trapped second graders from a burning building. Within minutes, the story began to spread across social media platforms. Parents in the crowd were live streaming Hero's rescues on Facebook and Instagram, using hashtags like Hero the Dog and Lincoln Elementary Hero. The footage was raw, emotional, and utterly compelling, showing a severely injured dog making trip after trip into a burning building to save children. By the time Hero emerged with his 14th rescue, Amy Richardson clutching her stuffed rabbit, the crowd had grown substantially. Parents from other schools in the district had arrived, bringing their own children to witness what many were calling a miracle in progress. "Mommy, is that the Hero dog?" asked 5-year-old Jessica Park, pointing toward the second-floor window where Hero had just appeared with Amy. "Yes, sweetheart," her mother replied, tears streaming down her face. "That's Hero, and he's saving all those children." The children in the crowd had become Hero's most vocal supporters. Students from Jefferson Elementary, Lincoln's rival school in the district spelling bee, had organized an impromptu cheering section. They chanted Hero's name and held up hastily made signs reading, "Go Hero," and "Save them all." The emotional investment of the crowd was palpable. With each child Hero brought to safety, a cheer would erupt that could be heard for blocks. But with each rescue, the tension also increased, as everyone could see the building's deteriorating condition and Hero's obvious physical distress. Social media was exploding with Hero's story. The hashtag Hero the Dog had begun trending nationally, with people sharing videos, photos, and messages of support from across the country. News outlets were picking up the story, and within an hour of the first news van's arrival, satellite trucks from major networks were en route to Maplewood. "I've been reporting on emergencies for 15 years, Maria Santos confided to her camera operator between live updates, "and I've never seen anything like this. This dog, He's not just rescuing those children. He's inspiring an entire community. The pressure on everyone involved was enormous. Parents of the trapped children stood in a tight group near the fire trucks, their faces masks of controlled terror as they waited for their children to appear at that second-floor window. Each time Hero emerged with a child, there was a moment of desperate hope as parents scanned the small face to see if it was their son or daughter. Mrs. Chen, Lily's mother, gripped her husband's hand so tightly her knuckles were white. 5 more, she whispered, having heard Anderson's count. Our baby is still in there. Standard protocols had been completely overtaken by Hero's extraordinary rescue mission, and they were now essentially supporting a dog's solo operation. Captain Rodriguez had positioned his ladder crew at the rescue window, specifically to receive the children Hero was delivering. In 30 years of firefighting, Captain Rodriguez told a reporter, I've never seen courage like this. This dog is doing what we couldn't do, going where we couldn't go. He's risking everything for those kids. Anderson found himself at the center of the growing media attention, but his focus remained entirely on Hero's condition and the rescue mission. When reporters tried to interview him, he brushed them off with curt responses. Not now, he said firmly. Ask me about Hero after he brings home all 20 kids. Right now, he needs our support, not our questions. The crowd fell silent as Hero emerged with his 15th rescue, little Robert Kim safe in the arms of the firefighters. Anderson's voice carried across the suddenly quiet gathering. 5 more children remaining. The words hung in the air like a prayer and a promise. 5 more trips for a dog who had already pushed himself beyond what anyone thought possible. 5 more journeys through hell for children who trusted him completely. As Hero disappeared back into the smoke-filled building, the entire crowd seemed to hold its breath. The story of the heroic police dog was spreading around the world, but for everyone gathered at Lincoln Elementary, there was only one thing that mattered: bringing home the last 5 children safe and sound. Hero's 16th rescue would later be remembered as the moment when even the most optimistic observers began to fear that the impossible task might truly be impossible. When Hero appeared at the rescue window with Sarah Martinez, the quiet girl who had whispered her readiness to trust him, he collapsed immediately after the firefighters pulled her to safety. Anderson, still positioned at the window, watched in horror as his partner's legs simply gave out. Hero lay on the superheated floor of the hallway, his sides heaving as he struggled for breath, his dark eyes showing the first signs of something Anderson had never seen before: doubt. Hero, Anderson whispered, crawling across the floor to reach his partner. Talk to me, boy. Are you with me? Hero's response was barely perceptible, a slight movement of his tail and an effort to lift his head. The effort it cost him was obvious, and Anderson felt his heart breaking as he realized the full extent of his partner's injuries. Hero's paw pads were no longer just burned, they were raw and bleeding. His breathing was labored and shallow, and his beautiful coat was so damaged that he was barely recognizable. But when the sound of children calling his name drifted from Mrs. Peterson's classroom, Hero's ears perked up with obvious effort. 4 voices were calling to him now: Emma, Lily, Carlos, and Tommy. The final 4, children who needed him to find the strength for 4 more trips through hell. Hero, you don't have to, Anderson began, but Hero was already struggling to his feet. The 17th rescue was 9-year-old Carlos Mendez, a boy who had been praying aloud for Hero's safety throughout the ordeal. When Hero entered the classroom, Carlos was ready, standing by the door with his hands clasped in front of him. I prayed for you, Hero, Carlos said solemnly. I asked God to give you strength. Hero's tail managed a weak wag, and together they began the treacherous journey. This time Anderson could see that Hero was stumbling more frequently, and twice the dog had to pause and rest against the wall. But Carlos never let go of Hero's collar, and never stopped whispering encouragement. You can do it, Hero. We're almost there. My mama's waiting for me, but first I have to help you help me. The 18th rescue happened almost immediately afterward, as if Hero understood that momentum was crucial now. Tommy Wilson, a boy known for his boundless energy, had been chosen by Hero with what seemed like strategic thinking. Tommy could move quickly and wouldn't need as much guidance. But even with Tommy's energy and eagerness, the journey took longer than any previous rescue. Hero was now visibly struggling with each step, and Anderson could see blood droplets marking their path through the hallway. The building's structural integrity was failing rapidly, and ominous creaking sounds echoed through the corridors. "Anderson," Chief Williams called from below. "We're running out of time. The building's showing signs of imminent structural failure." "Two more," Anderson shouted back, his voice cracking with emotion. "Just 2 more children." When Hero returned to Mrs. Peterson's classroom after delivering Tommy to safety, the scene that greeted him was both heartbreaking and inspiring. Emma Martinez and Lily Chen, best friends since kindergarten, were standing together near the door, holding hands and waiting with a courage that seemed impossible in children so young. "We're ready, Hero," Emma said, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her soot-stained cheeks. "We know you'll take care of us." But Hero's condition had deteriorated to the point where Mrs. Peterson felt compelled to speak up. "Hero," she said gently, kneeling down to his level, "you beautiful, brave dog, you've already saved 18 children. If you need to rest." Hero's response silenced her. Despite his obvious pain and exhaustion, he approached Emma and Lily with the same careful, gentle demeanor he'd shown to every child. His message was clear. He would not leave them behind. The building chose that moment to remind everyone of the race against time they were running. A loud crack echoed through the structure, followed by the sound of something heavy collapsing on the first floor. The entire building seemed to shudder, and dust and debris rained down from the ceiling. Emma and Lily instinctively pressed closer together, but neither moved away from Hero. Their trust in him was absolute, even as the world literally crumbled around them. "Who goes first?" Emma asked, displaying the leadership that had characterized her throughout the ordeal. Hero's choice surprised everyone. Instead of selecting the natural leader, Emma, he gently nuzzled Lily's hand. The quiet girl, who was Emma's best friend, looked up with wide eyes. "Me first?" Lily whispered. "But what about Emma?" Hero's dark eyes met Emma's, and somehow, impossibly, the 7-year-old girl understood. "He wants to save me for last," Emma said with sudden clarity. "He knows I'll be okay waiting alone, because I'm strong. But he doesn't want you to wait alone because we're best friends, and best friends shouldn't be scared alone." The wisdom in Hero's choice was staggering. By taking Lily first, he was ensuring that the natural leader, Emma, would be his final rescue, the child most capable of maintaining her courage during the longest wait. But as Hero prepared to guide Lily through the increasingly dangerous hallway, another ominous crack echoed through the building. This one was different, deeper, more final. Everyone understood that they were now measuring time, not in minutes, but in heartbeats. 2 children remained, and Hero's extraordinary mission was entering its most critical phase. After delivering Lily safely to the firefighters, Hero stood at the rescue window, his entire body swaying with exhaustion. The 19th rescue had pushed him beyond what any living creature should endure. Yet one child remained. Emma Martinez, the brave little leader who had kept her classmates calm throughout their ordeal, sat alone in Mrs. Peterson's smoke-filled classroom, waiting with a courage that defied her 7 years. Anderson could see that Hero was operating purely on will now. The dog's physical resources were completely depleted. His breathing came in harsh, rattling gasps that spoke of smoke-damaged lungs. His legs trembled with each step, and the bloody paw prints he left behind told the story of a body pushed far beyond its limits. Yet when Hero looked back toward the classroom, his dark eyes still held that unwavering determination. "Hero," Anderson whispered desperately, "you don't have to do this. We can find another way. The firefighters, they have equipment." But both Anderson and Hero knew there was no other way. The stairs were completely impassable now. The ladder couldn't reach due to the oak trees, and the building structure was moments away from catastrophic failure. There was only Hero, and there was only one more child who needed him. When Hero entered Mrs. Peterson's classroom for the 20th and final time, he somehow understood would be the most important walk of both their lives. "Hello, Hero," Emma said softly, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her soot-stained cheeks. "I knew you'd come back for me. You promised Lily you would, even though you didn't use words." Hero approached Emma slowly, each step requiring tremendous effort. When he reached her, he gently nuzzled her hand, in the same gesture of comfort and partnership he'd offered to 19 other children. But there was something different about this moment, a recognition between two beings who understood courage in ways that went beyond age or species. "Are you hurting very much?" Emma asked, her young eyes taking in Hero's obvious injuries with a compassion that was heartbreaking. "Your paws are bleeding, and your fur is all burned." Hero's tail managed one weak wag, and he moved toward the door. Emma fell into step beside him, her small hand resting gently on his back, careful to avoid the areas where his coat was most damaged. The journey through the hallway was the most harrowing yet. The floor had become dangerously unstable, and several ceiling tiles had fallen, creating obstacles that forced them to navigate carefully around debris. The smoke was so thick that visibility was nearly zero, and the heat was intense enough that Emma had to cover her mouth with her shirt to breathe. But Emma never once complained or expressed fear. Instead, she became Hero's source of strength, offering quiet encouragement as they made their way through the hellscape. "We're doing great, Hero," she whispered as they carefully stepped over a fallen beam. "Just a little bit farther. I can see the light from the window." Hero's legs gave out twice during that final journey, but each time Emma waited patiently as he struggled back to his feet, never rushing him, never expressing impatience. She seemed to understand that Hero was giving everything he had, and more. When they finally reached the rescue window, Emma turned to Hero before allowing the firefighters to pull her to safety. "Thank you," she whispered, her small arms wrapping around his neck in a gentle hug that somehow conveyed more gratitude than any words could express. "Thank you for saving all of us. You're the best dog in the whole world." As the firefighters lifted Emma through the window and into the safety of their ladder, a tremendous cheer erupted from the crowd below. All 20 children were safe. Hero had accomplished the impossible. But the moment of triumph was short-lived. As soon as Emma was secured, Hero's body finally surrendered to the punishment it had endured, motionless on the superheated floor, his body finally claiming the rest it had been denied. "Hero, Hero, stay with me," Anderson pleaded, gathering his partner into his arms despite the danger of their position. From the window, Anderson could hear the crowd below. The initial cheers of triumph had given way to a collective gasp as people realized that Hero wasn't emerging with Emma. The silence that followed was profound. and heartbreaking. Hundreds of people holding their breath, waiting to see if their four-legged hero had survived his extraordinary mission. "We need to get him out of here now," Captain Rodriguez called from the ladder. "This building's not going to hold much longer." But as Anderson prepared to carry Hero to safety, the sound that every emergency responder dreads echoed through the building. The deep, final groan of structural failure. The moment between Hero's 19th and 20th rescue created a scene that would haunt Anderson for the rest of his life. As Hero prepared to return to Mrs. Peterson's classroom for Emma, the building's structural integrity reached its breaking point. A massive support beam on the first floor gave way with a sound like thunder, and the entire building shuddered violently. In the classroom, 6-year-old Emma Martinez found herself truly alone for the first time since the ordeal began. The smoke was getting thicker by the minute, and she could hear Mrs. Peterson calling her name from somewhere far below, the teacher having been evacuated through a first-floor window during Hero's previous rescue. "Hero," Emma called out, her voice small in the smoke-filled room. "Hero, are you coming back?" The silence that answered her was terrifying. For the first time since Hero had appeared in their classroom doorway, Emma felt the full weight of her situation. She was a 7-year-old girl, alone in a burning building, with no way out except to trust that a severely injured dog would find the strength to make one more impossible journey. At the rescue window, Anderson faced the most difficult decision of his career. Hero lay semi-conscious in his arms, his breathing shallow and irregular. Every rational thought told Anderson to evacuate immediately with his partner. Hero had already accomplished the impossible. 19 children were safe because of his courage and determination. But from the classroom came Emma's voice, faint but audible through the smoke. "Hero, I'm still here. I'm waiting for you like you taught us to wait." Hero's ears twitched at the sound of the child's voice, and his eyes fluttered open. Despite his critical condition, despite the fact that his body was shutting down from smoke inhalation and exhaustion, Hero tried to lift his head toward the sound. "No, boy," Anderson whispered, tears streaming down his face. "You've done enough." The dog's dark eyes, though dimmed by pain and exhaustion, still held that unwavering determination. One child remained. His job wasn't finished. Anderson found himself faced with an impossible choice: take Hero to safety and leave Emma to hope for another rescue method that didn't exist, or allow his critically injured partner to attempt one more rescue that might cost both of them their lives. The decision was made when Hero took a step toward the classroom, then looked back at Anderson with an expression that clearly said, "Trust me, one more time, trust me." "God help us both," Anderson whispered, releasing his hold on Hero. The journey back to Mrs. Peterson's classroom was Hero's calvary. Each step required an act of pure will that transcended physical capability. His burned paws left bloody prints on the floor, and he had to stop twice to rest against the wall, his sides heaving as he fought for each breath. But he pressed on, driven by something deeper than training or instinct, driven by love for a child who trusted him completely. When Hero finally appeared in the classroom doorway, Emma's face lit up with a joy that was heartbreaking in its purity. "You came back," she said, running to him despite the danger. "I knew you would come back for me." Hero's tail managed one weak wag, and he gently nuzzled Emma's cheek. But when he tried to move toward the door, his legs finally betrayed him completely. He collapsed onto the classroom floor, his breathing labored, and his eyes showing the first signs of defeat he'd displayed all day. Emma knelt beside him, her small hand stroking his singed fur with infinite gentleness. "It's okay, Hero," she whispered. "You're tired. You saved 19 kids, and that's already more than anyone thought possible." But Hero's response was to struggle back to his feet one more time. Using the last reserves of strength that existed somewhere in his magnificent heart, he stood and moved toward the door. His message to Emma was clear. They were leaving together, or they weren't leaving at all. Emma took her position beside Hero, her hand resting gently on his back. "Okay," she said simply, "let's go home." The final journey through Lincoln Elementary's burning hallway was a testament to the power of courage over circumstance. Hero moved like a ghost of his former self, each step requiring tremendous effort, each breath a victory over failing lungs. But Emma matched his pace perfectly, becoming forward together, a 7-year-old girl and a dying hero, united in their determination to reach safety. Anderson waited at the rescue window, his heart breaking as he watched their agonizingly slow progress through his smoke. The building was making continuous, ominous sounds now, creaking, groaning, settling in ways that spoke of imminent collapse. Every second that passed increased the danger exponentially. "Come on, Hero," Anderson whispered. "Just a few more steps. You can do this." The crowd below had grown to over 500 people, all watching in breathless silence as the drama played out in the second-floor window. Parents held their children close, firefighters gripped their equipment with white knuckles, and hardened emergency personnel found themselves praying for a dog they'd never met and a child they'd watched grow from infant to hero through this ordeal. Hero and Emma were within 10 feet of the window when the building gave its final warning. A deep, rumbling sound that seemed to come from the very foundation. Hero's trained senses recognized the sound immediately. Structural failure was imminent. With a burst of adrenaline that seemed to come from nowhere, Hero quickened his pace. Emma, sensing the urgency, stayed close to his side as they covered the final distance to the window. They were going to make it. Against all odds, through courage and determination and love, they were going to make it. "Here they come," Anderson called to the firefighters on the ladder below. "Get ready." Captain Rodriguez positioned himself at the window, ready to pull both Hero and Emma to safety. The crowd below began to cheer as they saw the pair approaching the rescue point. 20 children saved, an impossible mission accomplished, a happy ending snatched from the jaws of disaster. But Lincoln Elementary School had one final cruel twist in store. Just as Emma reached the window, just as Captain Rodriguez extended his arms to pull her to safety, the ceiling above them gave way without warning. A massive section of the roof, weakened by fire and structural damage, collapsed in a thunderous crash that shook the entire building. Hero's reaction was instantaneous and purely instinctual. As chunks of burning debris rained down on them, he threw his body over Emma, shielding her from the falling wreckage with his own flesh and bones. The impact drove both of them to the floor, Hero taking the full force of the collapse across his back and shoulders. "Hero!" Anderson's scream cut through the chaos as he watched his partner disappear beneath the rubble. The rescue window was suddenly blocked by debris, cutting off their escape. Climbed through the partially blocked window and began pulling debris away from where he'd seen Hero and Emma fall. His hands were cut and bleeding within seconds, but he didn't stop. "Emma! Emma, can you hear me?" Anderson called. From beneath the rubble came a small voice. "I'm okay. Hero saved me." But Hero won't wake up. Working with desperate efficiency, Anderson and Captain Rodriguez cleared enough debris to create a small opening. Through it, they could see Emma, covered in dust and soot but miraculously unharmed, cradled beneath Hero's motionless body. The brave dog had absorbed the full impact of the collapse, protecting the child with his final act of heroism. "Is Hero okay?" Emma asked, as strong hands pulled her through the opening to safety. "Tell me Hero's okay." But as the firefighters worked to extract Hero from the rubble, the devastating truth became clear. The magnificent dog who had saved 20 children lay unconscious and broken, his breathing so shallow it was barely detectable. The final rescue had cost him everything. As Hero was carefully lifted from the debris and passed through the window to the waiting paramedics, a profound silence fell over the crowd. The impossible had been accomplished. All 20 children were safe, but the price paid by their four-legged savior was almost too much to bear. Emma, safe in her mother's arms, looked up at the rescue window where Hero was being carried away. "He saved us all," she whispered. "Every single one of us." The wail of sirens pierced the air as the ambulance carrying Hero raced through the streets of Maplewood toward the emergency veterinary hospital. Inside the vehicle, paramedic Janet Morrison worked frantically to stabilize the unconscious police dog, while Anderson held Hero's head in his lap, whispering words of encouragement that he prayed his partner could somehow hear. "His vitals are weak but steady," Morrison reported to the hospital over radio. "Severe smoke inhalation, multiple burns, possible internal injuries from the ceiling collapse. ETA is 3 minutes. Anderson's hands shook as he gently stroked Hero's singed fur, being careful to avoid the worst of the burns. The magnificent dog who had just accomplished the impossible lay motionless on the stretcher, his breathing so shallow that Anderson had to watch carefully to detect the rise and fall of his chest. "Stay with me, Hero," Anderson whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved them all. Every single one of those kids is safe because of you. Now you need to fight for yourself." At Maplewood Emergency Veterinary Hospital, Dr. Sarah Chen had assembled her best trauma team the moment they received word that Hero was incoming. The 45-year-old veterinarian had seen countless emergency cases in her 20-word. "Clear Trauma Bay 1. Dr. Chen commanded as the ambulance pulled up to the emergency entrance. "I want oxygen ready, IV fluids, and our best monitoring equipment. This dog has been through hell, and we're going to do everything possible to bring him back." The transfer from ambulance to Trauma Bay was swift but gentle. Hero's unconscious form was placed on the examination table, and Dr. Chen immediately began her assessment, while her team worked around her with practiced efficiency. "Officer Anderson, you need to let us work," Dr. Chen said gently, noticing that Anderson was trying to stay beside Hero despite the medical team's need for space. "I'm not leaving him," Anderson replied firmly, his own face streaked with soot and showing minor cuts from his rescue efforts. "He's my partner. He doesn't go through this alone." Dr. Chen looked up from her examination and saw something in Anderson's eyes that made her nod in understanding. "Stay against the back wall then. You can talk to him. Sometimes familiar voices help." The initial assessment was sobering. Hiro had sustained severe burns over approximately 40% of his body, with the worst damage to his paw pads and back where falling debris had struck him. His lungs showed significant damage from smoke inhalation, and there were signs of possible internal injuries from the ceiling collapse. "Doctor," called veterinary technician Mike Rodriguez, monitoring Hiro's vital signs. "Blood pressure is dropping, and his oxygen levels are critically low." Dr. Chen's response was immediate and decisive. "Get him on high-flow oxygen, start an IV drip for fluid resuscitation, and prepare for emergency surgery. We need to assess internal damage immediately." As the medical team worked with urgent precision, Anderson found himself pushed into a corner of the trauma bay, watching helplessly as his partner fought for his life. The sounds of medical equipment, beeping monitors, hissing oxygen, the steady drip of IV fluids, created a symphony of modern medicine working to save one brave dog's life. "His temperature is dangerously high," reported Dr. Lisa Park, Hiro's assigned critical care nurse. "The burns are causing severe inflammation, and with the smoke inhalation—" "I know," Dr. Chen replied grimly. "Start cooling measures, but gradually. Too fast and we risk shock." The first few hours were touch and go in the most literal sense. Hiro's vital signs fluctuated wildly as his body tried to process the trauma it had endured. Twice, his heart rate dropped to dangerous levels, requiring immediate intervention from Dr. Chen's team. Meanwhile, news of Hiro's condition had spread throughout the community. At Lincoln Elementary, now a scene of investigation rather than emergency, Lily Chen sat in her parents' car, wrapped in a blanket, but refusing to leave until she heard news about Hiro. "Is Hiro going to—" "Day's events. He saved me. He carried me out of the fire." Mrs. Chen held her daughter closer, her own eyes filled with tears. "Hiro is very sick, sweetheart, but he's getting the best care possible. The doctors are working very hard to make him better." "Can we go see him?" Lily asked. "I want to tell him thank you." The same scene was playing out in cars and homes throughout Maplewood. 20 families, each with a child who owed their life to Hiro's courage, were waiting for news about their four-legged savior's condition. Back in the trauma bay, Dr. Chen completed her initial emergency procedures and turned to Anderson with a grave expression. "Officer Anderson, I need to be honest with you about Hiro's condition. The next 24 hours will be critical. He's suffered severe trauma to multiple systems: respiratory, circulatory, integumentary. We're doing everything we can, but what?" Anderson asked, though he dreaded the answer. "But even if he survives, there will likely be permanent limitations. The damage to his respiratory system, the burns to his paws. He may never be able to return to active police work." Anderson looked down at Hiro's still form, remembering the magnificent dog who had bounded toward him that very morning, full of life and energy and joy. The thought that Hiro might never again experience the simple pleasure of running through the park or playing with children was almost unbearable. "Doctor," Anderson said quietly, "Hiro's job was never just about police work. His job was about protecting people, especially kids. As long as he's alive, as long as he's with us, he'll still be doing that job." Dr. Chen nodded, understanding the depth of the bond between officer and canine partner. "We'll fight for him, Officer Anderson. Hiro earned that much today." Word of Hiro's critical condition spread through Maplewood like wildfire, carried by social media posts, phone calls, and the powerful bonds of a community that had just witnessed something extraordinary. Within 2 hours of Hiro's arrival at the veterinary hospital, The first families began arriving in the waiting room. Emma Martinez was among the first, despite her parents' protests that she needed rest after her ordeal. The 7-year-old girl, who had been Hero's final rescue, carried a hand-drawn picture of Hero surrounded by hearts and the words, "Get well soon," written in purple crayon. "I have to give this to Hero," Emma explained to her parents as they entered the hospital waiting room. "He saved me last. That means we have a special connection." Soon, other children began arriving with their own tokens of love and gratitude. Marcus Thompson, the quiet boy who had been Hero's first rescue, brought a small, stuffed dog, the dog who had risked everything to save them. The waiting room of Maplewood Emergency Veterinary Hospital had never seen anything like the gathering that began that evening. Children who had been strangers that morning were now bonded by their shared experience and their common concern for Hero's well-being. Anderson had refused to leave the hospital despite his own need for medical attention. His hands were bandaged from the cuts he'd sustained, clearing debris, and he was being treated for mild smoke inhalation. But he remained planted in a chair in the waiting room, ready to be called back to Hero's side at any moment. "Officer Anderson," said Mrs. Peterson, Hero's teacher friend who had been evacuated from the school during the rescue. "How is he really doing?" Anderson looked up at the teacher who had shepherded her students through their terrifying ordeal, his eyes showing the strain of the day. "He's fighting, Mrs. Peterson. Hero's the strongest dog I've ever known, and if anyone can pull through this, it's him." Dr. Chen emerged from the treatment area every few hours to provide updates to the growing crowd in the waiting room. Her reports were carefully measured, professional but compassionate, always honest about the challenges Hero faced while maintaining hope for his recovery. "Hero's condition remains critical but stable," she announced during her 8 p.m. update. "We've successfully treated some of the immediate threats from smoke inhalation, and we're managing his pain and preventing infection in his burns. The next several hours will be crucial in determining his body's ability to heal from these injuries." The families had organized themselves into informal shifts, ensuring that someone was always present at the hospital to represent Hero's extended family of rescued children. The Rodriguez family took the early evening shift, the Parks covered late night, and the Martinez family would arrive early in the morning. Children who were too young to fully understand the medical complexities of Hero's condition expressed their concern in ways that brought tears to the eyes of the adults present. 6-year-old Tommy Wilson had brought his favorite blanket for Hero to use. 9-year-old Michael Torres, whose broken arm had made his rescue more difficult, had convinced his parents to stop at a pet store to buy Hero's favorite brand of dog biscuits. "When Hero wakes up, he's going to be really hungry," Michael explained seriously to Dr. Chen during one of her waiting room visits. "Saving 20 kids is probably the hardest work a dog ever did." Anderson found himself moved beyond words by the devotion these children showed to Hero. As the hours passed and exhaustion began to take its toll, he dozed fitfully in his waiting room chair. But even in sleep, his hand remained positioned, as if he were still stroking Hero's fur. The vigil had become more than just a medical wait. It had become a community celebration of love, gratitude, and hope. Nurses reported that they had never seen anything like the outpouring of support for a patient, and the hospital's social media accounts were flooded with messages from around the world as news of Hero's story continued to spread. Local news stations set up outside the hospital, interviewing families and getting updates on Hero's condition. But the real story wasn't being told by reporters. It was being written in the waiting room, where 20 children and their families maintained a vigil for the dog who had given them the greatest gift possible, the gift of life itself. Hero's first night at the Emergency Veterinary Hospital became a testament to the power of modern veterinary medicine and the dedication of professionals who understood that this particular patient represented something far greater than a single dog's life. Dr. Chen and her team worked in rotating shifts around the clock, monitoring Hero's vital signs, adjusting medications, and fighting to stabilize his condition. At 2:17 a.m., Hero went into respiratory distress. Alarms began blaring in the intensive care unit, and Dr. Chen rushed from the break room where she had been catching a few minutes of rest. Hero's oxygen levels had dropped dangerously low, and his breathing had become even more labored. "Get me the bronchodilator," Dr. Chen ordered, working quickly to clear Hero's airways of accumulated fluid and debris. "His lungs are fighting the damage from smoke inhalation." Anderson, who had been dozing in the waiting room, was awakened by the commotion and immediately understood that Hero was in crisis. Despite the late hour, several of the families were still present, and they watched with terror as medical personnel rushed back and forth through the treatment area. "Is Hero going to die?" whispered Lily Chen, who had convinced her parents to stay late because she was too worried about Hero to sleep at home. Her mother held her closer, but couldn't find words to answer the question that was in everyone's mind. The crisis lasted 45 minutes, during which Dr. Chen and her team fought to stabilize Hero's respiratory system. When his breathing finally improved and his oxygen levels began to climb, a collective sigh of relief seemed to emanate from the entire hospital. "He's stable for now," Dr. Chen reported to Anderson, her scrubs soaked with perspiration from the emergency intervention. "But this is what we're going to be dealing with for the next several days." His body is fighting multiple battles simultaneously. Anderson asked for permission to sit with Hero during the overnight hours, and Dr. Chen agreed, understanding that the bond between canine officer and dog often played a crucial role in recovery. Anderson pulled a chair close to Hero's treatment table and began, "Kids and their families are praying for you to come back to us." As if Anderson's words had reached him through the fog of unconsciousness, Hero's tail moved, just a tiny twitch, barely perceptible, but movement nonetheless. "Did you see that?" Anderson called excitedly to Dr. Park, who was monitoring Hero's vital signs. "I saw it," she confirmed with a smile. "That's the first voluntary movement we've seen since he arrived. It's a good sign." By morning, news of Hero's crisis and his small sign of responsiveness had spread throughout the community. Emma Martinez had organized her classmates through her mother's social media account, and by 6 a.m., #SaveHeroTheDog was trending nationally on multiple platforms. Children from schools across the district were creating artwork for Hero, writing him letters and sharing their own stories of bravery inspired by his example. The hashtag had been picked up by celebrities, professional athletes, and politicians, all sharing messages of support for the heroic police dog. "Look at this," Mrs. Martinez said to Anderson, showing him her phone screen filled with messages from around the world. "There are people in Japan, Australia, England, everywhere, sending prayers and good wishes for Hero." But perhaps more meaningful than the global attention were the local gestures of love. The children Hero had saved had each written personal letters to their four-legged hero, letters that Anderson read aloud during his bedside vigil. "Dear Hero," Anderson read from Emma's letter, "you are the bravest dog in the world. When I was scared in the fire, you made me feel safe. When I grow up, I want to be brave like you. Please get better so we can play together again. Love, Emma." Each letter brought tears to Anderson's eyes, but he read them all, believing that Hero could somehow hear the love and gratitude in each word. Dr. Chen's morning assessment showed cautious improvement. Hero's vital signs were stabilizing, and his response to pain stimulation indicated that his neurological functions were intact. The road to recovery would be long and difficult, but Hero had survived his first critical night. "He's a fighter, Dr. Chen told the assembled families during her morning briefing. Hero's body is responding to treatment, and while we're not out of danger yet, his prognosis is improving. The cheer that went up from the waiting room could be heard throughout the hospital. 20 children who owed their lives to Hero's courage and their grateful families now had reason to hope that their hero would survive to receive their thanks in person. Hero's tail twitched again when Anderson resumed his position beside the treatment table, and this time, there was no doubt. Their hero was fighting his way back to them. On the 4th morning after the rescue, Anderson was reading aloud from another batch of Get Well cards when he noticed something different about Hero's breathing pattern. Instead of the shallow, labored respirations that had characterized his unconscious state, Hero's chest was rising and falling with a more natural rhythm. Anderson leaned forward in his chair, hardly daring to hope. "Hero?" he whispered softly. "Can you hear me, boy?" For a moment, there was nothing but the steady beeping of monitors and a gentle hiss of oxygen. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, Hero's eyelids began to flutter. Anderson's heart raced as he watched his partner's first struggle toward consciousness since the ceiling had collapsed around them. "Dr. Chen," Anderson called out, his voice cracking with emotion. "I think he's waking up." Dr. Chen rushed into the intensive care unit, followed closely by veterinary technician Mike Rodriguez. They had all been waiting for this moment, the first sign that Hero's damaged brain was ready to rejoin the conscious world. Hero's eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, as if he were trying to remember where he was and what had happened. The familiar brown eyes that Anderson knew so well looked confused and frightened, which was heartbreaking to witness in a dog who had always been so confident and sure of himself. "Easy, boy," Anderson said gently, placing his hand where Hero could see it without moving his head. "You're safe. You're at the animal hospital, and you're going to be okay." At the sound of Anderson's voice, Hero's eyes seemed to clear slightly. His tail moved, just a small wag, but unmistakably intentional. The simple gesture brought tears to Anderson's eyes and prompted a cheer from the veterinary staff, who had been caring for Hero around the clock. "That's it, Hero," Dr. Chen said softly, checking his pupils and neurological responses. "Welcome back." But as Hero became more aware of his surroundings, the extent of his injuries became painfully apparent. When he tried to lift his head, the effort clearly caused him significant discomfort. His attempt to shift his position on the treatment table was met with obvious pain that made him whimper, a sound that cut through Anderson's heart like a knife. "His burns are still very tender," Dr. Chen explained to Anderson, while gently examining Hero's responses. "And the damage to his respiratory system means he'll tire easily for quite some time. The good news is that his neurological functions appear intact. He recognizes you. He's responding appropriately to stimuli, and his cognitive abilities seem unaffected." Anderson felt a mixture of relief and concern as he processed this information. Hero was going to live, but the magnificent dog, who had bounded through life with such energy and joy, was going to face significant challenges. Hero's first attempt to stand was both inspiring and heartbreaking to witness. With tremendous determination, he managed to get his front legs under him and push his chest with a soft whine that spoke of frustration as much as pain. "It's okay, boy," Anderson soothed, gently stroking Hero's head. "We'll take this one day at a time. You don't have to be Superman today." News of Hero's awakening spread through the community with the same speed that word of his rescue mission had traveled. Within an hour, the hospital waiting room was filled with children and parents who had rushed over to celebrate this crucial milestone in their hero's recovery. Dr. Chen allowed small groups of children to visit Hero's bedside, understanding that seeing the children he had saved might provide important emotional healing for the recovering dog. When Emma Martinez entered the intensive care unit and saw Hero's open eyes, her reaction was immediate and profound. "Hero," she exclaimed, tears streaming down her young face, "you're awake. I knew you would wake up." Hero's response to seeing Emma was remarkable. Despite his pain and confusion, his tail began wagging more vigorously, and he actually lifted his head slightly to get a better look at her. The connection between the brave little girl and the heroic dog was as strong as ever. Anderson found himself making phone calls to update the broader community on Hero's progress. Calls that were as much about his own emotional processing as they were about sharing information. "Chief Williams," Anderson said into his phone, his voice thick with emotion. "Hero's awake. He's going to make it. He's really going to make it." Similar calls went out to the fire department, the school district, and the dozens of people who had become invested in Hero's recovery. Each conversation was a celebration of the small victory of consciousness regained, tempered by the understanding that the road ahead would be long and difficult. But Hero was alive. Hero was aware. And Hero was surrounded by more love than any dog had ever received. The rehabilitation phase of Hero's recovery began slowly and carefully under the guidance of Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a veterinary physical therapist who specialized in helping working dogs recover from traumatic injuries. Her first assessment of Hero's condition was thorough but gentle, taking into account both his physical limitations and his emotional state. "The damage to his hind legs is significant," Dr. Walsh explained to Anderson during their initial consultation. "The burns to his paw pads have healed, but there's scar tissue that affects his mobility. Combined with the muscle damage from the debris impact, he's going to have permanent limitations in his movement." Anderson watched as Dr. Walsh worked with Hero, helping him understand how to compensate for his injuries. The process was frustrating for a dog who had always been so physically capable and confident. Hero would try to move in ways his body could no longer accommodate, leading to stumbles and falls that clearly distressed him. "He remembers being able to do things that he can't do anymore," Dr. Walsh observed. "That's common in working dogs recovering from injuries. They have muscle memory that their current physical condition can't match." The most heartbreaking moments came when Hero would try to demonstrate his old capabilities, attempting to jump up to greet Anderson, trying to run toward the children who visited him, struggling to maintain the proud posture that had been so characteristic of his police work. Each failed attempt was met with what could only be described as canine frustration. Anderson found himself learning alongside Hero, discovering how to support his partner's new limitations while encouraging his continued efforts. He learned to steady Hero when he walked, to provide a stable presence when Hero attempted to stand, and to offer comfort when physical therapy sessions became too challenging. "The key," Dr. Walsh explained, "is to help Hero find new ways to be successful. He's always been a working dog, a dog with a purpose. We need to help him discover what his new purpose can be." The children's visits became an unexpected form of therapy for Hero. When Emma Martinez read him stories, Hero would lie quietly beside her, his breathing calm and his expression peaceful. When Marcus Thompson brought his stuffed dog to show Hero, the real dog's tail would wag with gentle appreciation. These interactions seemed to remind Hero that his value wasn't solely based on his physical capabilities. "Look how happy he is with the kids," Anderson observed to Dr. Chen during one of Hero's regular checkups. "Even though he can't do the things he used to do, he still lights up when they're around." Dr. Chen nodded thoughtfully. "Hero's always been about protecting and serving people, especially children. That drive isn't diminished by his physical limitations. It might even be stronger now because of what he's been through with them." But there were difficult conversations that couldn't be avoided. 3 weeks into Hero's recovery, Dr. Chen sat down with Anderson to discuss Hero's future in law enforcement. "Anderson, you know I have to be direct with you about this," she began gently. "Hero will never be able to return to active police work. His respiratory system has sustained permanent damage from smoke inhalation, his mobility is significantly limited, and the stress of high-intensity situations could be dangerous for him now." Anderson had known this conversation was coming, but hearing the words still felt like a physical blow. Hero's identity had been so wrapped up in being a police dog, in being Anderson's partner in law enforcement. What would he become if that identity was taken away? "But that doesn't mean Hero's working days are over," Dr. Chen continued. "It just means we need to find a different kind of work for him, something that uses his intelligence and his natural connection with people, especially children, without putting physical demands on him that he can't meet." As if responding to the conversation about his future, Hero lifted his head from his bed and looked directly at Anderson. The expression in those intelligent brown eyes seemed to say, "Whatever comes next, we'll figure it out together." Anderson reached over to gently stroke Hero's head, feeling the familiar texture of fur that was slowly growing back over the areas that had been burned. "You're right, Doc. Hero's always been about more than just police work. Maybe it's time for him to become something even more important." The outpouring of support for Hero's recovery exceeded anything Anderson or the hospital staff had ever witnessed. Letters and packages arrived daily from across the United States and even internationally, all addressed to Hero, the brave police dog, at Maplewood Emergency Veterinary Hospital. The hospital had to dedicate an entire storage room to accommodate the gifts that kept pouring in. Dr. Chen's administrative assistant, Maria Santos, had taken on the task of cataloging the donations and correspondence. "Officer Anderson," she said, showing him a thick folder, "we've received over 10,000 letters for Hero, and the financial donations, they've covered his medical expenses completely, with enough left over to fund his ongoing care for years." The generosity was overwhelming. Children from schools across the country had organized fundraisers, sending everything from piggy bank contents to proceeds from bake sales. An elementary school in Texas had raised $3,000 through a Heroes campaign. A group of retired police officers in California had sent a check for $5,000 with a note that simply read, "From one hero to another." Local businesses had stepped up in remarkable ways. Peterson's Pet Supply had donated a year's worth of special diet food recommended for Hero's recovery. The Maplewood Veterinary Clinic had offered free follow-up care for as long as Hero needed it. Even the local bank had established a special Hero Fund account to manage the continuing donations. But perhaps the most meaningful gifts were the personal ones. A little girl from Oregon had sent her favorite stuffed dog with a note explaining that she wanted Hero to have a friend while he got better. A retired firefighter from New York had mailed his department's ceremonial challenge coin. Veterans from across the country sent medals and patches, recognizing Hero as a fellow first responder who had served with honor. The magnitude of attention reached its peak when Governor Patricia Hayes announced her intention to visit Hero personally. The governor's office had been following Hero's story through social media, and she wanted to present him with the state's Medal of Valor, the first time the honor had ever been bestowed on an animal. "Hero represents the very best of public service," Governor Hayes said during her visit, with news cameras rolling and Hero lying contentedly beside Anderson. "His courage and sacrifice remind us that heroism comes in all forms and that the bonds between those who serve and those they protect are what make our communities strong." Hero seemed to understand the significance of the moment. Though he couldn't stand for the ceremony due to his injuries, his tail wagged steadily as the governor pinned the medal to a special collar that had been crafted just for the occasion. But the most important milestone in Hero's recovery came 6 weeks after the rescue, when Dr. Chen finally cleared him for his first walk outside the hospital. Anderson had been looking forward to this moment for weeks, knowing how much Hero missed being outdoors and active. The walk itself was short, just 50 yards from the hospital entrance to a small garden area. But it represented a triumph of determination over adversity. Hero moved slowly, with Anderson providing support and encouragement with each step. His gait was different now, more careful and deliberate, but he was walking. "Look at him," Dr. Chen observed, watching Hero pause to sniff at flowers in the garden. "He's finding joy in simple things again." As Hero stood in the sunlight, his healing coat gleaming and his tail wagging softly, Anderson found himself thinking about the future. Hero would never again chase suspects through alleyways or search buildings for evidence. But there was something peaceful and dignified about this new version of his partner. "What do you think, boy?" Anderson asked, kneeling beside Hero in the garden. "Ready for the next chapter of our story?" Hero's response was to gently nuzzle Anderson's hand, then look back toward the hospital where so many people had worked so hard to save his life. But there was something in his expression that suggested he was ready to move forward, ready to discover what new purpose awaited him. The decision about Hero's future had been taking shape in Anderson's mind for weeks, influenced by watching Hero's interactions with the children who visited him, by seeing how much joy he brought to people simply by being present, and by understanding that true service comes in many forms. Hero needed a new mission, a new way to serve his community, and Anderson was beginning to understand exactly what that mission should be. 2 months after Hero's rescue mission, Principal Martinez stood before the Lincoln Elementary School Board with a proposal to honor the dog who had saved 20 children. The packed conference room buzzed with anticipation. "This will be more than a memorial," Martinez began. "It will be a place where generations learn courage, sacrifice, and service." Slides revealed the Hero Memorial Garden to be built between the school and playground. A peaceful retreat, outdoor classroom, and Hero's permanent home. When board policy, with Officer Anderson responsible for his care. The most moving part, the children Hero saved had helped design it. Emma Martinez suggested raised garden beds so Hero could smell flowers without bending. Marcus Thompson planned shaded rest spots. Lily Chen proposed a small fountain for fresh water and calming sounds. Board President Jennifer Walsh summed it up. "This isn't just a garden, it's a classroom of courage and compassion." The vote? Unanimous approval. Anderson spoke for Hero. "His heart has always belonged to children. This garden is his gift to us, a reminder that love is the greatest force for good." Construction became a community celebration. Every weekend, volunteers brought tools, plants, and decorations. Hero, unable to work but refusing to miss a moment, supervised from a lawn chair, tail wagging as children planted flowers in his favorite colors. The design was both beautiful and practical. Wide pathways for Hero's mobility, shaded benches for eye-level interaction, raised beds for scent, and adapted play features so Hero could enjoy his toys without strain. Marcus anchored rope toys and mounted tennis balls at reachable heights. A bronze plaque read, "In honor of Hero, K9 Unit 847, who saved 20 children from fire through courage beyond measure." True heroes come in all forms. Love is the greatest strength of all. The garden included fire safety displays, interactive lessons on first responders, and accessibility features like wheelchair paths, braille signage, and sensory areas. Anderson often grew emotional watching the children Hero saved work beside their parents. "Do you think Hero knows this is for him?" Emma asked. "I think he knows," Anderson replied. The dedication ceremony drew the whole town. Wearing a new collar with his Medal of Valor, Hero took the first walk through his new home, surrounded by the children whose lives he had saved. The next morning, Anderson brought him early. Hero seemed to understand this was his place, built for his comfort, filled with love. As students arrived, they stopped to greet him. Tommy Wilson brought a drawing of Hero being brave. Hero recognized each child, tail wagging faster for familiar faces like Emma and Lily. Anderson realized this new role might be even more important than their police work. Hero's calm presence comforted a kindergartner with a scraped knee and helped a shy new student settle in. Teachers began holding outdoor reading sessions in the garden, noticing improved focus and engagement. The most touching moment came during the first fire drill. Some younger children glanced nervously at Hero, worried he'd be afraid, wagged his tail once as if to say, yes, he had found his calling again. Since his arrival, Hero's daily life at Lincoln Elementary had become a purposeful routine. Each morning at 7:30, Anderson found him awake, tail wagging in anticipation. Their partnership, once defined by law enforcement, was now built on a shared mission, caring for his kids. "Morning, boy," Anderson would say, checking his water and medication. "Ready to take care of your kids?" Hero's whole body answered yes. By 7:45, children began arriving. Hero stationed himself at the Memorial Garden entrance, greeting each with gentleness, soft barks for familiar faces, patient stillness for shy newcomers, and quiet comfort for those in distress. Mrs. Patterson recalled, "When Miguel cried about his parents' divorce, Hero put his head in his lap. 10 minutes later, Miguel was talking freely." At recess, the garden became a peaceful hub. Conflicts faded around Hero, and friendships formed easily. In afternoon story sessions, he lay in the amphitheater's center, listening attentively to every reader. "He never interrupts," said 9-year-old Carlos Mendez. "He always looks like he's really interested." Hero's ability to sense emotional need was uncanny, offering playfulness, gentleness, or stillness as needed. Teachers wove his story into lessons on courage, loyalty, and standing up for others. "He makes abstract concepts real," Principal Martinez explained. When the day ended, Hero often sat by the memorial plaque, as if reflecting. Anderson would join him. "Satisfied with today's work?" The answer was always a contented sigh and a nuzzle. The 20 children Hero had saved shared lasting bonds with him. Emma Martinez, now a confident 4th grader, introduced new kindergartners to the bravest dog in the world, teaching them to be gentle. Lily Chen, the last rescued from the fire, visited daily, finding comfort in his presence. "When I have nightmares, I think about how he came back for me even when hurt," she told her mother. Hero's presence became tradition at school events, the Harvest Festival, holiday concerts, the science fair. Fire Captain Rodriguez, part of the rescue mission, led safety programs with Hero by his side. "The lessons stick," Rodriguez said. Hero lived them. Other therapy and service dogs visited to learn from him. Trainers documented his methods, and Hero patiently mentored nervous animals. Anderson was proud. "He's helping more children now than he ever did as a police dog," he told Dr. Chen. Teachers felt calmer teaching in the garden. Parents loved seeing Hero at pickup, and even school maintenance noted fewer behavioral issues. The garden had become the heart of the school. Hero's impact reached far beyond Maplewood. National Geographic's Hero's Heart, a story of courage and love, captured both the rescue and his daily influence. Director Sarah Mitchell noted, "His real heroism is what he continues to do every single day." With the Hero Foundation, the district created free lesson plans on character, service, and the human-animal bond, shared nationwide. The University of California's veterinary school studied Hero's intuitive empathy, suggesting it could transform therapy animal training. Animal rescues began screening shelter dogs for similar potential, launching Hero programs in several cities. His story inspired policy change. The National Police Dog Foundation created the Hero Award for retired canines in community roles. Departments began programs to transition retired dogs into civilian service. Social media amplified the message. #HeroTheDog trended steadily as children worldwide shared acts of courage like Hero would. Visitors traveled to the Memorial Garden from across the country and abroad. Hero's story touches something universal. Principal Martinez said, "It proves courage and love can overcome anything." Anderson spoke often at conferences showing videos of Hero at work. Hero's legacy isn't just about one rescue, he told audiences. It's about showing up every day to make life better with what you have. From one moment of heroism in a burning school to daily acts of quiet service, Hero had become a living symbol of resilience, love, and the bonds between protector and protected. His influence now global, but his heart forever with the children of Lincoln Elementary. The morning of October 15th dawned crisp and clear, exactly 1 year after the fire that had changed so many lives at Lincoln Elementary School. The Memorial Garden bloomed with autumn flowers and banners reading "Heroes, Heroes, 1 year strong," made by art classes to honor their four-legged guardian. When Anderson arrived, Hero was already awake, tail wagging as if he knew the day's importance. Time had been kind to him, his coat fuller now, though patched with silver where burns had healed. His steps were still careful, but his posture radiated confidence. The celebration began in the gym, but the heart of it took place in the Memorial Garden. All 20 children Hero had saved, now confident third graders, stood in a circle, each holding a yellow rose and a handwritten letter. Emma Martinez, student body president, read first, "1 year ago you saved our lives, but over this past year you've taught us how to live them. Being brave doesn't mean you're never scared. It means doing what's right even when you are." Marcus Thompson added, "You taught me being quiet doesn't mean being weak. You're gentle and calm, but the strongest dog I know. Because of you, I'm not afraid to be myself anymore." Each child placed a rose at Hero's plaque, forming a golden ring at its base. Hero watched, tail gently wagging, as if recognizing every face. Retirement from the Maplewood Police Department, awarding him the Medal of Valor and full pension benefits. The crowd erupted as Anderson accepted the medal, but the true celebration came when the children clustered around Hero for a photo. 20 smiling faces, small hands resting on their hero's fur. That image would become iconic. Anderson, promoted to sergeant for his role during the fire and his community work since, looked on. "That's Hero's real legacy," he told Dr. Chen, gesturing toward the children's growth in confidence and purpose. Many now dreamed of becoming first responders, veterinarians, or advocates for children and animals. After the ceremony, Hero lay in his favorite garden spot, watching school life flow around him. Anderson sat beside him. "1 year down, boy. Ready for whatever's next?" Hero's tail thumped in answer. The Hero Foundation, started to support his medical care, had grown into a national organization aiding injured service animals and promoting the human-animal bond in schools. Headquartered just blocks from Lincoln Elementary, its walls displayed the group photo as its centerpiece. "We began wanting to care for Hero," said Mrs. Martinez, now president, but we found countless service animals needing help and communities eager for programs like his. Over $2 million in grants had funded veterinary treatment, rehab, and new roles for police dogs, military canines, and therapy animals. Scholarships sent dozens of students to veterinary school, many inspired by Hero. Educational programs based on his story reached over 500 schools in 43 states, teaching courage, service, fire safety, and animal care. Teachers reported children engaged more deeply when learning from a real hero. "Fiction can't match it," said Dr. Sarah Patterson, who helped design the curriculum. Hero's story makes bravery tangible. Maplewood also implemented the state's most comprehensive fire safety program, with stricter building codes, better evacuation routes, and improved emergency coordination. Hero protocols for school emergencies spread nationwide, encouraging creative use of trained animals in rescues. His story appeared in 3 children's books, including Hero's Heart, a bestseller, whose proceeds aided animal rescue. High school classes studied him as an example of real-world heroism. Psychology students examined the human-animal bond. Business students analyzed the foundation as a model for turning tragedy into positive change. The Memorial Garden became a destination for educators, animal behaviorists, and therapy animal advocates. Delegations from around the world came to observe Hero's gentle, intuitive interactions with children. Fire departments nationwide integrated lessons from his rescue into training. Most profoundly, Hero inspired countless young people toward public service. Career counselors saw a rise in interest in firefighting, law enforcement, emergency medicine, and veterinary work, directly linked to his story. He's shown kids they don't need superpowers to make a difference. Noted child psychologist Dr. Michael Torres, they just have to care enough to act. The garden itself became a symbol of resilience, proof that communities can create beauty from tragedy. Leaders from other disaster-affected towns visited Maplewood to learn from its healing process. Anderson often marveled at the reach of Hero's influence. What began as one dog's instinct to protect children had grown into a movement touching lives worldwide. That afternoon, sunlight dappled the pathways where Hero had walked countless times. Children's laughter floated from the playground. Hero lay at the garden's center, the same dog who had charged into a burning school, yet transformed, now embodying a truth he'd lived to teach. That heroism isn't only in moments of fire and danger, but in the quiet, daily acts of love and service. "You know what I've learned from you, partner?" Anderson said quietly, knowing that Hero's acute hearing would pick up his words even over the playground noise. "I used to think heroism was about the big moments, the dramatic rescues, the life-or-death situations. But watching you this past year, I've realized that real heroism is about showing up every day, caring for others, and using whatever gifts you have to make life better for the people around you." Hero's tail wagged softly at the sound of Anderson's voice, but his attention remained focused on the children playing nearby. A group of kindergartners had discovered a butterfly near the garden's flower beds, and their excited voices carried across the space as they marveled at its delicate beauty. Hero's expression seemed to mirror their wonder, finding joy in their discovery. Emma Martinez approached from the playground, now tall for her age, and carrying herself with the confidence of a natural leader. She settled beside Hero without fanfare, pulling a book from her backpack. Their daily reading routine had continued without interruption throughout the school year. "Hi, Hero," she said, opening the book to a marked page. "Today, we're going to finish the story about the dog who learned to be brave. I think you'll like the ending." As Emma began to read, other children gradually gravitated toward the memorial garden. This was the magic that Anderson had observed countless times. Hero's presence seemed to create a natural gathering point where children felt safe, welcome, and valued. The reading circle that formed around Hero was diverse in age, background, and personality, but united in their affection for their four-legged guardian. Marcus Thompson joined the group, followed by Lily Chen, Carlos Mendez, and several of the other children Hero had saved. But the circle also included Garden and always had time for a story or a comforting nuzzle. "Hero," said 7-year-old Ashley Kim, a second grader who had enrolled at Lincoln Elementary just that fall. "My mom says you're famous all over the world. Is that true?" Emma looked up from her reading with a smile. "Hero doesn't care about being famous," she said, with the authority of someone who truly knew their subject. "He just cares about us. That's what makes him special." Anderson felt his eyes fill with tears as he listened to the children's conversation. Emma's insight was profound and accurate. Hero had never sought recognition or fame. His contentment came from the simple, daily interactions with the children he served, from being needed and loved and valued for exactly who he was. As the afternoon progressed and the children returned to their classrooms, Hero remained in his spot in the memorial garden, surrounded by the evidence of a community's gratitude. The flowers planted in his honor, the pathways designed for his comfort, the toys positioned within his reach, all of it spoke to the enduring power of love and sacrifice to inspire positive action. Anderson rose to leave for his evening patrol shift, but paused to place his hand gently on Hero's head. "I'll see you in the morning, partner. Same time, same place." Hero's response was a gentle nuzzle against Anderson's hand and a soft wag of his tail. The gesture contained everything they had shared over the years: partnership, loyalty, love, and the deep satisfaction that came from serving something larger than themselves. As Anderson walked toward the school's exit, he turned back one more time to see Hero settling into his evening rest position, surrounded by the beauty and peace of his memorial garden. The sight filled Anderson with a profound sense of completeness. Hero had found his perfect place in the world, serving the community he loved in exactly the way that suited his gifts and his heart. The sun continued its descent toward the horizon, painting the memorial garden in golden light that seemed to make Hero's coat glow with its own inner radiance. Children's voices drifted from the school building as after-school activities began, and Hero's ears perked up with interest, always alert to the needs and activities of his beloved students. In that moment, as Hero rested peacefully in the garden created by love and gratitude, surrounded by the ongoing life of the school community he served, it was clear that he had found something precious and rare, a purpose that perfectly matched his heart, a place where he was needed and valued, and a legacy that would continue long after his own story ended. Hero represent the very best of what dogs can be. But every dog, regardless of breed, carries within them that same potential for devotion, courage, and unconditional love. The bond between humans and dogs transcends simple companionship. It's a connection that heals, protects, and transforms both lives in ways we're only beginning to understand. Hero showed us that heroism isn't about dramatic rescues alone. It's about showing up every day, caring for others, and using whatever gifts we have to make life better. Your own dog may not save children from fires, but they save us in countless smaller ways, with patient comfort during difficult days, unwavering loyalty through life's changes, and the simple joy of unconditional love. If you've been moved by Hero's story and want to deepen your connection with your own companion, there's a resource I've come across that many dog lovers have found meaningful. It's nothing fancy, just gentle insights into understanding your dog's heart a little better. Sometimes the smallest changes in how we connect can open up a whole new relationship with our faithful friends.